Yo, this is.
Yeah, they don't.
I really don't like this. I can't.
They don't wrecked it.
Now, because I want to go to this stuff. Alright, so, yep, it's live. So we are on.
Changing the table doesn't make your show good.
Yo, don't be looking down on us like that. I don't like that.
Changing the table.
You're gonna have to lower your chair or
Let's
something.
not do that.
Yeah, I don't like
too high.
I'm not gonna sit like
It was
this.
gonna be even worse if I was like this. Now, you know what I mean? Alright.
Yo.
Short people don't get no love.
You know what I'm saying?
We're gonna get it popping.
Sure, right.
Alright, so we're gonna be going live at 8 o'clock on the radio. So right now, like y'all already know, but letting you know some of the stuff we might reiterate when we go live on the radio, but we like to always have enough time, so we start a little early. You know,
I'm familiar with.
you know,
yeah.
All right, cool. So welcome, Louis Reed. What's up, brother?
What's going on, man?
So let's just go into real quick who you are, because a lot of people don't know. I found out when Van Jones on CNN shouted you out as one of the lead activists for criminal justice reform, and then when I called you and I spoke to you, within like 2 minutes you gave me your background. I was like, damn. So if you could just kind of give that to me, man, give everybody who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So, excuse me. My name is Louis L. Reed. I'm the national organizer for Cut 50. Cut 50 is a bipartisan criminal justice organization co-founded by CNN political commentator Van Jones, now Reform CEO.
Reform CEO of what Meek Mills and Jay Z did.
Meek Mills, Jay Z, Robert Kraft, and Mike Rubin. Mike Rubin owns the Philadelphia 76ers. There's a $50 million criminal justice war chest, so to speak, that Van is going to be administrating to be able to advance criminal justice reform in the nation, specifically around probation and parole. I grew up in Bridgeport. I'm from Connecticut. You know, I'm a Connecticut native. Served 14 years in federal prison. I was indicted back in 2000 for bank fraud and felon in possession of ammunition. Went to prison. While I was in prison, there were 3 things that happened with me that was transformative.
Was you guilty?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Without compunction.
Okay.
Yeah. Without compunction. Yeah. What they got me for? I think that the only charge that they dropped against me was probably jaywalking or something like that. But
okay.
Yeah, I was definitely guilty.
Okay.
While I was in prison, there were 3 things that happened with me. One, and I'm unapologetically Christian, so I had a spiritual transformation. The second thing that happened was an education track opened up in my life. I wasn't blessed enough just to get one degree, a bachelor's degree in psychology, or another bachelor's degree in criminal justice, but I went on to get my master's degree in clinical counseling. And the third,
you get this while you were?
I got that while I was in prison.
Okay.
I got 3 degrees while I was in prison. I had a little bit of brown paper bag under the mattress, drug money stashed away, which allowed me to subsidize my education while I was incarcerated. The third thing that happened was that a righteous indignation lit up in my mind, and essentially what happened was I looked around and I saw that there was a wealth of genius that was being diminished by excessive prosecution and really disproportionate sentencing. And I wanted to do something about that. And I developed a notion: those who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but often furthest from resources and power. And I wanted to be able to come out and impact this system as best as I could. And I began to do that while I was incarcerated. I began to facilitate classes. I began to curate campaigns. I began to, just get involved with people that I knew who strategically were involved in issues that were near and dear to my heart. And when I came home, I continued my track. As we were talking, before we went live, or before, we went on the air, I was working here in New Haven. I worked at Columbus House as a case manager for people who have been impacted by the criminal justice system and also duly diagnosed. And ultimately, what I wanted to do is I wanted to recontribute back into my community, which was the city of Bridgeport. The community that I had bankrupted, and I wanted to redeposit back into those spaces and into those places. So I conceptualized, I did what was considered in research a qualitative and quantitative analysis on criminal justice in the city. conceptualized a reentry program.
At this point, you're doing this by yourself.
I did this by myself.
You didn't collaborate with nobody. You're just like looking into this all by yourself.
All by myself. And obviously, you know, I had the support of some people, but you know, for the most part, you know, this was a self-driven effort and campaign. And I did a qualitative and quantitative analysis of, you know, reentry criminal justice in the city of Bridgeport. Introduced the program to the city. They adopted it and saw fit for me to be the first reentry director for the city of Bridgeport. I was in that position for approximately 18 months to 2 years.
How long ago was that?
I believe that was in maybe 2016. So I was released, I should say that I was released in 2014.
Damn. So just within these few years, all of this that you're doing has happened.
Absolutely. And that's just favor and grace, you know, like favor and grace of God. And I think that, you know, faith without works is dead. And I think that, you know, it was in equal part, you know, the work that I put into the favor and the grace that I have on my life. So I was appointed into that position. I'm in that position for approximately 18 months to 2 years, and then I'm rearrested.
Oh.
Here's the scratch on the record, right? I'm rearrested, and I'm rearrested for one of two things. Number one, at the time when I was in this position, I have children. One of my children is 23 years old. The mother of my 23-year-old daughter, who happened to be about 21 at the time, brought me back to court for child support arrears. And I'm rearrested for child support arrears that accrued while I'm incarcerated.
No.
Yeah. And it was an unfortunate situation. And then it just so happened that simultaneously, I had a cousin of mine who ripped somebody off. And when he ripped somebody off, these people, you know, they kidnapped him, they pistol whipped him, they urinated on him, and quite frankly, you know, like we say in the street, they was about to pop his top. So I get a call, hey, cuz, this is what it is, so on and so forth. So when I show up, I'm like, listen, man, I have a business account. You know, if I happen to drop my checkbook around you, and you happen to pick it up, let my cousin go, and, you know, that'll be that. So that's what we did. You know, that's what I did. And, you know, I take full responsibility for it. You know, it was something that was illegal, that was done, and, you know, I was arrested for it, you know, for filing a false complaint, so on and so forth, because I reported my checkbook stolen. So in any event,
that's as real as it gets.
Yeah, and
that's as real as it gets, right?
And when I left the city of Bridgeport, you know, I fell into a clinical depression, right? You know, I remember like the night after I got arrested, and, you know, the Connecticut Post, they got me on blast, and, you know, all of this other stuff, and I went to the pharmacy and I bought an over-the-counter sleep aid, and I'm in the back seat of my SUV, and I'm going to commit suicide, and I hear, like, you know, like there's you know, there is no coming back from this, right? Like, you've already reached the ceiling. And as I'm in the back seat of my truck, I hear my spirit, rejoice not against me, O my enemies. For when I sit in darkness, the Lord is going to be a light unto me. And when I fall, I shall rise again. I didn't know how I was going to get back up. I didn't know when the light was going to shine in that mentally melancholy and dark situation. But I knew that eventually, if I just continue to hang on, I was going to be all right. So ultimately, to make a long story short, I was recruited for a criminal justice position here in the state of Connecticut, where I ran the policy shop for the Cattell Center for Health, Equity, and Justice. Even in the midst of this case, while, you know, the entire criminal justice community kind of like ostracized me, they said, like, this cat was the poster boy for, you know, reform in the state of Connecticut, so on and so forth. We want nothing to do with this guy. These people took a gamble on me, and through relationships that I had previously forged, etc., they took a gamble on me. I'm involved in that. I get involved with SB 13, which is the bill that was introduced and successfully passed here in Connecticut, Dignity for Incarcerated Women, that prohibited the shackling of women who are pregnant and incarcerated, and also allowing women to have access to free feminine hygiene product. I was involved in that bill, and then here comes a call one day from Van Jones and that team, And they recruited me for the position that I'm in now. They thought that I could be able to bring value to the team. And at the time, this was when the First Step Act was actually in its infancy, and they wanted me to organize around that. They wanted my criminal justice expertise, and they wanted to be able to lift up the leadership of formerly incarcerated people. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Woo.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Can you do that all over again?
That was inspired, right? I ain't gonna lie to you.
I feel like, man, listen.
I gotta step my game up.
Yo, wow.
Down to the scripture. I was like, wait a minute, what? Who's that?
That's Micah.
Oh, okay, thank you.
That's Micah, chapter 7, verse 8.
Wait, I gotta write that
What
down.
church you go to?
I'm gonna go to a church in Bridgeport.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
This is nationally or just for
This is nationally.
national?
Yeah. So and we'll delve into it probably, but we have what's called our National Day of Empathy,
Yes.
where we raise awareness.
National Day of Empathy.
We raise awareness around criminal justice reform
So
issues.
big.
Okay.
So like last year we had 20 million social media impressions. This year I'm managing. We have 40 states signed on, so I'm literally managing people in 40 states, which means that I have to clear 40 states in between now and March 5th when our National Day of Empathy actually launches. We got a whole bunch of people who are going to be like doing our social media campaign. Obviously, you guys know that we're tethered with Kim Kardashian, Meek Mill, the usual suspect.
No, I didn't know Kim Kardashian had anything. I mean, I knew she went to the White House for.
Kim Kardashian is a very close ally.
To get
Really?
the guy part, didn't she get somebody
She got
pardoned?
somebody pardoned.
You
but
should
I
know
didn't
this name. You should know this name. She got Miss Alice Marie Johnson pardoned.
That's
The woman who was in federal prison for almost 20 plus years.
Yeah.
For trace amounts of crack cocaine and distributing, so on and so forth. Kim Kardashian was very integral in getting her pardoned.
Did she have anything to do with Centoria Brown as well?
No, she didn't have anything to do with.
Or is Brown the one I'm thinking about?
You're talking
young
about
girl.
Centoria Brown,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. All
But there was a lot of other influencer, outrage and advocacy on Centonia's behalf.
That made that happen.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but so we got like I was just on the phone last night with Trey Songz, and like I'm saying to myself, like look at my life, man. You know what I mean? Like I'm in a space with Kim.
Praise God, man.
Yeah.
Praise him. Praise the Most High. yo.
I'm in a space with Kim. I got Jay on the in my contacts. I got Meek in my contact. It's just like
I'm from church, man.
yeah.
I gotta have it.
Yeah.
You tell Jay, I said he's dead wrong for not rocking with the Cowboys, man. You know he a Cowboy fan. And tell him he should have showed up and showed out, man, for the Cowboys, man.
Bruh.
Yo, that's a lot, man. That's a lot, man. And respect to you.
Thanks.
Like big up, to you, because there's a lot of and for whatever reason, I'm just like in a totally different space this morning. You know what I mean? Because I see how, people of color, but not only that, especially I'm a man, so I can relate more. I see how men of color are looked down upon.
Yeah.
Even by
especially by our own
people.
Yeah, we worse to ourselves.
By our women, you know what I mean? I mean, we're really looked on like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
What would you say to, or how would you say for people in our city, in the smaller cities, if we want to contribute in that way to maybe something else that we feel is big to us, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that we just got to be supportive, right? Like I think that we are leaking collective power.
Yes, sir.
In our community, I always use myself as the canvas. When I got arrested, the people that I saw like sharing the article on Facebook, it was like. I get misty eyed about it right now, right? Because like it broke my heart.
Right.
Like I mean, like these are people like that I helped. These are people that I came out of my pocket for.
Right.
I have been featured in. Prior to that, I've been featured in the New York Times and I'm a HuffPost contributor, so on and so forth. Like
Prior to your arrest?
prior to my arrest,
Right.
yeah, I contribute to the Huffington Post. Like I'm, featured in the New York Times and things of that nature. And
While you were still in the street.
well, not while I was still in the street, but while I was still in the position at the city of Bridgeport.
Right.
So this is before you got rearrested.
Before you got rearrested.
This is before I got rearrested.
Yeah.
So when I got rearrested, like to see people like sharing an article
Right.
about me, like that was hurtful. Like there's certain things that you expect. You know, I often I'm a ardent student of the civil rights era, and one of the things that Dr. King said is very poignant. He said, in the end, it's not the voices of our critics that we will remember.
Yes, sir.
It's the silence of our friends.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And that's a fact.
That is so real.
You know, and
That's a fact.
and to see people like, you know, I had people like sending me the article, and I would just respond like, you know me, right? Like Google other articles. Like when you see somebody share that, post under that comment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like something positive. You follow what I'm saying?
Right.
And it broke my heart. And back to your point, as it relates to like who we are as a people, we need to lift up the leadership of those. You know, this. I'm about completion. I'm about, you know, cooperation, not competition.
Yes, sir.
I think that real true power partners complete. We don't compete against one another.
Right.
And I can really do a deep dive into like the Willie Lynch syndrome and how we kind of like, you know, 5 generations still separate, 4 or 5 generations separated from slavery, and we still have, you know, like that perpetuation of like who she thinks she is.
Yes, sir.
You follow what I'm saying? Like sis walks in a room, and just because she got her nails done at the you know one place and you ain't get your nails done at another place, it's like who she thinks she is. She thinks she all that. And I often tell people like your issues with me is not a reflection of who I am. It's a reflection of who you are not.
Yes, sir.
You follow what I'm saying?
You are not.
Yeah, it's not a reflection of who I am. It's a reflection of who you are not.
Yeah.
These are your own inadequacies that you are seeing, you know, reflected in me.
Yeah.
And you can be doing what I'm doing. You can be doing beyond what I'm doing.
But you rather hate on me instead of coming up and saying, "Yo, bro, you look sharp. Yo, that suit looks sharp, man."
It makes you uncomfortable.
I'm gonna tell you.
It makes you uncomfortable by seeing the qualities in me that.
Correct.
Yes,
And the 2 brief things that I'll say. Yesterday, I'm walking in the Chili's with I got my little cousin with me, and it was this kid. He was in there. He was about 12 years old, and when I came in, he was like, "Yo, man," he said, "I like your beard," and the people that was around him laughed, right? And I was like, "Thanks," and then I walked in and I stopped and I went back outside. I was like, "Come here, shorty." I said, "Listen," I said, "Don't be afraid to compliment another man, especially another black man." I said, "What you did," I said, "I didn't laugh at you. I said, I appreciate you." I said, "You on Instagram?" He's like, "Yeah." I said, "All right, you know, we're gonna, you know, exchange information." I followed him on Instagram, so on and so forth. But that's what we do. We shame people through laughter. You follow what I'm saying? We compliment through criticism. Oh, you think that you all that? Oh, I see your little car. Why can't it just be like, yo, I'm proud that you got.
Why I gotta be a little?
Yeah. You follow what I'm saying?
You got a new little job.
Yeah. You got a new little job now. You making a new little money. Like, why can't it just be what it's gonna be, girlfriend?
Right.
You follow what I'm saying? So back to your point, man. You know, I think that, you know, a lot of us, we are very inadequate in and of ourselves, and we don't necessarily allow that love, man. I believe, man, more love, more power.
Yes, sir.
Like unapologetically, I believe that, man.
Yes, sir.
To your point of like more love, more power, you know, and what I always said about a lot of different organizations in the community, and I think just us as a people, as human beings, we overlook empathy. So what made you? You know, how did the National Day of Empathy begin, and how do you see empathy?
Yeah, that was I'll tell you how I see empathy first and foremost, right? Like, you know, except for the grace of God, there go I. And I always look at other people that could be in a situation far much more worse. You know, I look at myself. I look at other people as myself being in a far much more worse situation than I am, right? So it makes me empathize, and I'm human. You know, I don't think that you can have gray matter in your head and a beating heart and not be empathetic to other people. But how I got the National Day of Empathy is going back. This is our 3rd annual one, and it was just a notion that, you know, that Cut 50 developed. And obviously, I wasn't with the organization at the time. But how do we build a coalition? How do we build collaboration nationwide in communities with organizations, with people who have been directly impacted by the system, and be able to move them to action, to be able to tell their stories in the way that you want to be able to tell your story, respectively, so on and so forth. Another initiative that we have at Cut 50 is called Love Army. And you probably saw, like, a few years ago, Van Jones went on this Love Army tour. This was right after the election, where he wanted to be able to infuse, like, a sense of love, like, man, in life, you know, because we're anemic when it comes to that. You follow what I'm saying? Like, this is a lot of stuff going on in the world, man. So Our empathy network is like the lifeblood of what it is that we do at Cut 50, and it's a national. It's like the Facebook effect, right? Except in like organizing. Like you know one person who knows somebody else who brings somebody else into the network, who brings somebody else into the network, and next thing you know, we got over 200,000 people in our empathy network.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
I love it. Empathy is so big, and it keeps us a lot of times from approaching this work with real love, with real heart, with real understanding. And I think we confuse empathy with sympathy, or like but really,
We were like literally just talking about this the other
we
day.
literally just talking about
And,
so you said National Day
and
of Empathy.
not only that, we go into this work not able to make real change,
right?
because you can't if you don't have
can't
empathy,
empathize,
then
yeah.
you can't see it. You're always from that judgmental, that critical standpoint,
Right.
and it's usually self internal. What you doing? What you know what I mean?
Well,
Or-
I wouldn't do that, so why would you do that?
you
It's like,
know.
But you got to take yourself out. It,
Right.
it requires humility, and I think that's a lot of times what we feel like we might have, but we don't.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? Because
Right.
we can't look outside of ourselves. So I just want to say real quick, peace to everybody watching. Let's see, we got Joel was good, Ernie, Yex was good. You know, everybody watching, we're going to go live at 8 o'clock on the radio. So some of the stuff that you heard now, because we definitely need you to tell your stories one more time.
All right.
Like,
It'll be consolidated.
Yeah.
I'll give you the 2-minute version of it. 120
So
seconds.
did you meet 45? Have you met 45 in person?
Yeah.
How was that?
Who's 45?
That's what I'm about to say.
Dude,
That's
don't ask that
Agent
question. Don't ask that question.
That's President
Oh,
Trump.
you mean okay?
So
okay.
let me-
I thought
okay,
that was
okay.
no.
Oh, you know
come
what?
on
I don't
now.
know. I
Yeah,
don't know.
you
I'm calling
know, I
it.
heard it before, but it just didn't.
Yeah.
45.
Yeah.
We're gonna be going live in like 2 minutes, so we
Okay.
can go to that
All right.
question. Make sure everybody. Can you hear your headphones?
I can't wear those headphones. They give me a headache after I leave. I swear to God.
Alright.
You got the one
You
ear.
should probably do one ear.
One ear.
Every time I leave here,
Do
I'm
one
like,
ear. It's
okay.
It's probably too tight, or you can just switch because these are a little looser.
Let me see. I don't want to mess them up.
Yeah.
No, I'm just
You
kidding.
got the cord up under the arm.
Where do I plug this one in at? There's no plug for this one.
Can we switch? She and I switch? Because he's a looser.
There's a plug here too.
Thanks.
Thank you.
One ear works.
Oh, they don't know when the camera on Facebook.
You right.
All right.
You right.
Oh, you want to plug in?
Just plug it in right there.
He said to give me a headache when I leave here.
It really does. I was like, yo. It was the conversation
Glad-
that deeper. Why does my head always hurt when I leave here?
You got it?
Yeah, I'm good. Can you hear me? We good?
I'll know in a
Test.
second
All right.
when we start to go live. But we should be good because I didn't put the mics on yet.
How come you can't see?
23 seconds.
The
Yeah,
two of us?
neither of us are going to be on.
Oh, okay.
It's
Well,
going to
you
be
can-
on them too. On,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I'm off camera, you're off camera, but it's all good.
We can't see him either.
Yeah, I'm.
He's not set up? Oh, you didn't set up?
Yeah, he set
I
up.
just have to switch to his camera.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Oh, my bad.
So
I'm mind my
he
business.
He has the camera.
I'm
view.
sorry, Justin. I'm mind my business.
Nah,
Yeah,
that's
no
good.
problem.
I need that advocacy sometimes. Good luck, advocacy.
Let's know if you're going to monologue.
Going live. 94.3 WYBC. This is Moving Target Radio. Good morning, New Haven. I am your host, Jay Kemp, and with me, as always, is my brother and co-host, Remedy Sharif.
Peace and blessings.
And, of course, the CEO of Herb, helping each other recover. Zulima, what's good?
Good morning, everybody.
So, just a couple of announcements, man. You know I usually want to catch up with y'all, but now, like, we got so many things coming up the next couple months, and I have to make sure I mention 3 things. Number 1, Black Love, all right? It's the Black Happy Love or Happy Black Love Day, a celebration of Black love with Cherie Baldwin and Kevin Muhammad. Y'all already know they come through all the time. Great couple.
Cute couple.
Tremel Lawrence, who definitely came through and, you know, had some women really upset at one point. He did.
I think I was one of them.
He said, yeah, because he said that y'all always got a side dude waiting.
We're not gonna talk about
Always
that right
in
now.
the wing.
Yeah, come on now, come on.
Conversation the other day.
Don't blow up my side dude. Leave him right where he is.
That is not what I said.
But no, he's great, and he's actually going to be there. He's a great author. So make sure y'all go out February 13th, 6 p.m. to 10, 305 Knowlton Street, Bridgeport, Connecticut. We also got Black Wall Street. Myself and Ty Richardson, Xavier Richardson, and of course El Dorado. We're bringing Black Wall Street back to New Haven at Career High School, February 28th at 5 o'clock. And if y'all don't know what Black Wall Street is, just picture all Black-owned businesses in one spot for all types of services in one place. All right, we're resurrecting what Black Wall Street really represents. And another event that's coming up.
Yeah, talk about it.
March 9th.
March 9th. I'm excited.
We're going to do our live show,
Yes,
all right, in front of
indeed.
an audience. All right, it's called the Grassroots Experience Live. The reason it's almost like Black Wall Street, but it's all grassroots work. That's what it is.
Right.
We're going to have all that power in one place. So if you are a person that does work in the community, if you want to know who's doing what in Connecticut, you got to come March 9th.
I need to put that on my calendar.
I'm excited.
Yeah, you need to be there. You
Bless
definitely-
I need to put that on my calendar.
And the performers, the speakers, man, I'm so excited about this. I can't wait. I'm energized,
Yes.
like, you know, thinking about, you know, we talk deeply about this, man. This is gonna be a beautiful thing.
It's going to be a beautiful thing. I mean, it's for the first time that we could see a unified front where it's not about coming with an agenda or debating ideas. We're just celebrating the work that everybody does.
And we love and respect the work that everybody does. And for the first time, we're giving out the Warrior Award.
Yeah, and we're not going to say who's going to get
Nah,
that,
not at all.
but
The
it's gonna be
Warrior
great.
Award.
So go to the Moving Target Podcast
good thing.
Facebook page for the Eventbrite link to get your tickets. It's going to be amazing. And we got some good food, performers. It's going to be great.
Beautiful.
All right. So, moving forward, if you are black or brown in America, then 9 times out of 10, somewhere in your family history, the criminal justice system has oppressively affected you. Some of you have watched the documentary 13th and realized how corrupt the system has been for years. Khalid Browder's story probably opened up your eyes to what we're really dealing with as well. Life sentences given out for nonviolent crimes, mothers unjustly kept from their children, and too many people end up going in and out, going in and coming out worse. And then beginning to feel hopeless after getting out, realizing the system is set up with collateral consequences that haunt them forever. All right? Many never bounce back. We've gotten to the point in our society where we can no longer ignore the need for criminal justice reform. Then, right before the closing of 2018, number 45, Agent Orange, President Trump, signed a bill for the First Step Act, all right, towards criminal justice reform. Not just signed the bill, but it was bipartisan. It was Democrats and Republicans involved. So I had to ask the question, what do y'all think? Y'all think it was good? And everybody had questions about what's in it. What does it consist of? Right? But we can't make the assessment without knowing exactly what's in it. So not too long after that, I learned that Jay Z and Meek joined forces to create what they call Reform, an initiative to push criminal justice reform. Right? So we all have still a lot of questions about what this is and how it's going to affect us, how it's going to help us. And we have with us today Connecticut native and award-winning author Louis Reed, all right, who is part of this whole movement more so than we even realize. And we just want to welcome him. He's going to give us some insight on that. What's up,
Yes,
Lewis?
sir.
What's up, man?
Thank you for coming through, man.
Thanks.
Yeah, good to have you.
It's great to be here. Great to be.
You are traveling the world.
Yeah, and it's not many things that get me up early in the morning, like at 7:30.
We get that all the
Yeah. So when the people reach out, man, I had to respond to the call,
Yeah.
and you just happened to catch me before I head out to Arkansas, like
Wow.
in a few days. So
You know, it was, I first heard your name from Van Jones on CNN when he said, he mentioned you as part of one of the leaders of pushing criminal justice reform and getting this First Step Act signed, which I want to get into. I want to go into, like, how did this happen? What's in it and how does it benefit us? And then Kevin Muhammad shouted you out.
Kevin is my man.
You know,
Kevin is my brother.
Okay.
That's my
yeah,
brother.
He speaks very highly of
He and El Dorado, to be honest with
Okay,
you.
yeah.
El Dorado and I, we grew up with each other. We was in the sandbox together.
No
Yeah.
But I think what inspired us off the rip, you know, before we went live on the radio, we were live on Facebook. Just give us a background of your story. You don't got to consolidate it. But if you can just let the people know who you are, where you come from, and how you got to this point.
Sure. So my name is Louis L. Reed. I'm the national organizer for Cut 50. Cut 50 is a bipartisan criminal justice organization co-founded by CNN political commentator Van Jones and Jessica Jackson. And we have two very robust but very simplistic goals. Number one, to be able to reduce the national prison population and to reduce crime in the United States and America. But we want to do that, and we want to do it in half, and we want to do it within the next 10 years. So we do that by introducing policy on a state level that is going to be smart, that is actually going to reduce prison populations, and be involved with legislators on a bipartisan level. I'm from Connecticut, Bridgeport, born and raised. I'm from that 90s crack cocaine, Father Panic Village, Stratford Avenue era of Bridgeport. So I have a full range of familiarity as it relates to criminal enterprising, being involved in the streets, busting my gun, throwing people in the trunk, jaywalking. About it, I didn't get into that. They let me go. That's the one. Yeah. I think that's the one case that I beat. I can kind of I took that to trial and won. But in any event, back in 2000, I was indicted by the United States federal government, and I was sentenced to 188 months in federal prison. For your listening audience, don't waste your time trying to count on your fingers and toes trying to figure out how much that is. It's a lot of time. It's almost 16 years. I served 14 years off of that 16-year sentence. And while I was incarcerated, there were several things that happened to me. Number one, I had a spiritual conversion. Number two, there was an education track that opened up in my mind. And number three, there was a righteous indignation that lit in my spirit, where I saw that the predominantly population in our United States federal prison happened to be black, brown, and poor whites. And I wanted to do something about that. I wanted to come out. I wanted to impact this system. I wanted this world to know that I not only that I existed, but I lived here in this particular time for this particular moment, and I was going to be a part of a great movement. So when I came home, I held several different positions, one of which happened to be right here in the great city of New Haven, at Columbus House. I was a case manager where I work with criminal justice and dual diagnosis population. And ultimately, I went on to conceptualize and introduce the first reentry office for the city of Bridgeport. I was in that position for approximately 2 years before I was rearrested. Gasp! Can you cue the gasp?
So real quick. So you went for 14.
Yes.
Within that time, you got degrees.
Yeah, I did. I got degrees. I earned my bachelor's degree in psychology. Then that wasn't enough. My grandmother. I was raised by my grandmother because both my parents, they were indicted when I was 5 years old. So my maternal grandmother raised me. And I think that we'll delve into that intergenerational and that pathology of criminology, so on and so forth. But while I was, my grandmother was a major proponent of education. You know, one of the things that she used to always tell me is that people can take cars away from you, they can take houses away from you, but the one thing they can never take from you is your education. So I went in, you know, I earned one degree in psychology, a bachelor's degree in psychology. Then I went back and I was a glutton for punishment, so I earned a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. Then I was a glutton for punishment, and I went back and I earned my master's degree in clinical counseling. Wow. Yeah. And I'm a licensed alcohol and drug counselor in the state of Connecticut, and I'm also a board certified addictions counselor.
So,
as well.
You get out, you start this position of re-entry, and you didn't get any help. You conceptualized this.
I conceptualized this all myself and by myself, and the reason why I did that is because when I did get out, what I saw was that there were organizations that were working in silos. You had these organizations that existed in theory, but the practice of what they were there for was not necessarily meeting the rubber where the road was. So, you know, I went to people and, you know, they wanted to put me in front of a computer to like do resumes and things of that nature. I'm like, I know how to do a resume, right? Like, I think that I can frame a sentence together, and I'm a little bit articulate, and I know how to interview well. So like, what is there to offer people such as myself? And this is not to diminish, you know, people who need those literacy skills, etc. But that wasn't me.
Right.
And I realized that you had these organizations who are out there that was getting all of these funding dollars, and all of that stuff was being absorbed in these so-called administrative costs, but the money wasn't meeting the people. Right. So I wanted to get involved, and I'm like, nah, you know what? And also, the city of Bridgeport needed to be invested. You know, that was my notion. You know, we had a second chance mayor who ran on a second chance platform and needed to create fair chance opportunity for people who didn't look like where he came from. Right. You know, because I can go into a major tangent about, you know, white privilege, so on and so forth. And he, you know, Mayor Ganem, he admits that, you know, it's by virtue of his privilege, it's by virtue of his access to power, so on and so forth, that created opportunities for him that very well were closed off to people such as me. So I conceptualize the program, I introduce it, excuse me, the city adopts it, appoints me as the first reentry director for the city, and then 18 months into that position, I'm rearrested. I'm rearrested for child support arrears that accrued while I was incarcerated. And
that's just, I still don't, you said it before, but I'm not absorbing. My brain is like, what?
That's insane.
Yeah. And you know, and there was another incident, you know, where I exercised an aberration of judgment. You know, I had a family member, you know, who was opioid addicted, and, you know, he ripped some guys off for $13,000 worth of drugs. And this happened right or around the same time. He ripped some people off for some drugs. I get a call. You know, they kidnapped him, they urinated on him, they were, you know, my notion was that they were going to kill him. So I show up and I'm like, hey, listen, I got a business account. If I happen to drop my checkbook around you and you happen to pick it up and you happen to cash it, take what you need to take, let my cousin go, we're going to send him out of town, and all is going to be well in the world, rainbows and unicorns. It just so happened that when I got arrested for the child support situation, it happens to be in the Connecticut Post, and the municipality, Trumbull, where I reported my checkbook stolen, they see it in the paper. They say, hey, this guy was in here 6 months ago and reported his checkbook stolen. And then I get arrested again on that for filing a false report. So you got to consider, right? Like, I'm at the so-called height of my career. Right.
They're not looking at any of that.
They're not looking at any of that. I'm at the height of my career. At that time, you know, I'm kind of like a poster boy for Connecticut, right? Like, this is, you know, people exceptionalize me. This is what reentry is supposed to look like. This is what reform is supposed to look like, et cetera, et cetera. And then I get rearrested, and then rearrested. After the rearrest.
Rearrested.
Yeah, rearrested, right? This is like the remix on top of the remix. And I felt like I'm in a twilight zone. And I'm literally suicidal. Like, I literally, like, I remember driving around Bridgeport. And, you know, I said to myself, you know, well, if I park on this street, somebody's probably going to see my car. And because I want to commit suicide, and I want to take these pills. And I just like, I feel so embarrassed. And I remember going down to Seaside Park, and it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. And I remember, you know, going up a one-way in Seaside Park, and I positioned myself where, you know, I knew that nobody was going to be able to find me probably until the next morning. And I get in the backseat of my truck. I put the Notorious Big B.I.G. Suicidal Thoughts on, and that's playing, and I'm listening to it, right, and I got these pills. And right before I compose, I take out my phone and I draft all of these text messages to these people like, hey, I'm sorry, so on and so forth. Like, I'm sorry for disappointing you, etc. And right before I'm going to take these pills, I hear something in my spirit, and it's a scripture. It says, "Rejoice not against me, O my enemies, for when I sit in darkness, the Lord is going to be a light unto me. And when I fall, I shall rise again." And then there was this montage of images that God reminded me of when I was in darkness, how he was a light unto me. When I was in a space in federal prison where I had to stand up every day for account for 14 years, God was a light unto me. When people had wrote me off to say that I would never be, it was God who said that, rejoice not against me, right? So I emerged from that situation, after about, 6 months of clinical depression. And it hurt, right? Like, it hurt to see people like share things about you on social media, that it's not a reflection of who you are.
Right.
I tell people all the time, my history is not my destiny. Even the me that existed yesterday is not the me that is living today. Right. We are human. We should have the dexterity to be able to grow and to be able to recover. And I am not the full spectrum of a mistake that I made in a moment in time.
Right.
And for you to hold me to that is not a reflection of who I am. It's a reflection of who you are not, because you can't grow. You can't grow. You can't get to a space of love and life, so on and so forth. But so in any event, I go on in my professional career. I had the great fortune of being involved in a criminal justice organization here in Connecticut, which is called the Catal Center for Health, Equity, and Justice. I ran their policy shop. I was involved in a bill that's called SB 13, which is the Dignity for Incarcerated Women's Act that prohibited the shackling of pregnant women here in the state of Connecticut, that provided free feminine hygiene products to women who are incarcerated. And also Connecticut is the first state in the union to pass within the same bill a provision that allows for transgender housing. So essentially, if you come in to the Department of Corrections and you identify, and you have, I don't know, and forgive me, your LGBTQ community if I'm getting this wrong, but if you have, if you got like a gender,
I'll come for you.
Yeah, I definitely ain't worried about that. I'm covered by the blood. But if you have like gender reassignment or something to that degree, what they will do is they will house you accordingly, so that it's going to reduce the incidence of sexual assaults and things of that nature. And then here comes Van Jones while I'm in that position. Wow. I get recruited for the current position that I'm in, and that was around the First Step Act, to be able to organize around the First Step Act and also manage our National Day of Empathy.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's
amazing.
Yes.
I can hear that over and over. I'm like,
yeah, man.
So let's get into the work that you're doing. All right. So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Van Jones, Jay Z.
His beard is glistening this morning. I think he put some Afro sheen on it or something like that.
He was with us not too long ago with Emerge.
Yes,
right,
I
which
was.
is also another initiative towards criminal justice.
I wanted to tackle when he said he emerged from that situation, which
long ago with Emerge.
Yes,
right,
I
which
was.
is also another initiative towards criminal justice.
I wanted to tackle when he said he emerged from that situation, which I could relate to, because I emerged from the same similar situation.
Very similar, actually.
Exactly.
Even with down to personal life.
Exactly.
Which you shared in your monologue.
Yeah, man, and it's very inspiring to emerge and become a light that shines for ourselves as well as other people who are trying to get to that light as well.
Absolutely. So let's get into the work that. So when I saw that Trump signed off on this First Step Act, I was blown away, because I never thought that this is what I would see. I thought
you and me both.
Okay.
I think it's like everyone here.
I never thought that this is what I would see. I thought
you and me both.
Okay.
I think it's like everyone here.
You. I think all of us, we did.
Like, wait, what?
Because when you consider, right, he ran on crime and carnage. Right. He ran on this hardline stance on criminals and them versus us, and those people are not like us, and they don't fit into the fabric of American culture, so on and so forth, disregarding and, you know, somebody not advising him that there are more than 70 million people in the United States of America with criminal convictions. So we are not, you know, we are not a minority. And in fact, we are a majority if you just do the numbers.
Right.
But
So
You see?
yeah.
Go ahead, Ray. Keep going.
So, you know, what was it? First of all, what's in the First Step Act?
Yeah.
Because, you know, one of the things that I immediately thought, and we even have a question here about, you know, how, let me just make sure, how long have black people been making new policies? Where has it gotten African Americans? You know, is this, and I agree in the fact where I'm like, well, something's up with that. You know, this is just another slave reform. They're just gonna find another way. Is this real? What's in this?
Is it real? It was signed. Believe me, I know it's real. So let's delve into that for a second, right? First and foremost, I this is the first thing that I want to say before I get into the historical context about the First Step Act. When you look at 1959, the cusp of the civil rights movement, you had MLK, who had to work with an openly hostile administration. First and foremost, the First Step Act is not the end all. It's not the last step act, right? This is not the most comprehensive reform bill that we are going to see the end closed curtain. Everybody, you know, breaks back into their respective corners. That's not it. This is that 1959 version that produced the 1963-1964 Civil Rights Act. You follow what I'm saying? So this is not the crescendo of what we are looking for. This is literally the first step down a long road of undoing a lot of the draconian issues that have disproportionately impacted our community. So I just want to put that out there at the outset.
Yeah, because I think people did expect, like, oh, you know,
yeah,
it's not going to fix anything.
Correct.
It's the first step.
Correct. It literally, by virtue of its name. The second thing is that I understand people's apprehension as it relates to President Trump, but I think that past is prologue. So when you go back in, we like to laud, you know, MLK as being like this great civil rights engineer and this, you know, intellectual, you know, embodiment of life and so on and so forth. So if that is the case, and I personally believe that that's true, when you look at the past being prologue, MLK went into a White House and dealt with LBJ, and LBJ was an open bigot. I mean, he used the N-word in the White House, you know, without compunction, right? He tossed it around like it was you know, part of his vernacular, right? So if he had the temerity to walk into a space that was openly hostile and work with an openly bigoted and openly racist administration, then who were we when we get a call from Jared Kushner, who happened to be a child of a father of a person who was incarcerated? Hence the reason why Jared was one of our greatest allies. He himself is the child of a parent that was incarcerated. His father did federal time. And I personally applaud the fact that he got into a space of privilege, has access to power, so on and so forth, and didn't forget the families who didn't have their loved ones there doing Thanksgiving. The families who didn't have a gift under the tree for Christmas. The families who weren't able to participate in Hanukkah, so on and so forth. He didn't forget that. So is that my time?
No.
Oh, okay. So all right. So let's talk about the genesis of the bill. So back in May of last year, I should say back in March of last year, Cut 50 gets a call from the White House, which was Jared Kushner, basically saying we want to work on criminal justice reform. The bill initially conceptualized was very skeletal. It only expanded telephone time and visiting hours for people who are incarcerated in the federal system. Enters Van Jones and Jessica Jackson, our Cut 50 co-founders, who said, okay, if we have an opportunity to do something and this administration wants to work on something, we need to partner with people that is going to make sure that this thing, you know, moves ahead with the appropriate steam that it needs. So now enters Hakeem Jeffries out of New York and Doug Collins, a Democrat and a Republican, who co-authored a bill, introduce it, sponsor it, and now it has traction. It passes the House with an overwhelming majority in May. Now the bill when it was initially conceptualized and when it was initially introduced, it goes from expanding phone time and visiting hours to now being prison reform. And if you give me just about 120 seconds, I'll break down to your audience the difference between prison reform and sentencing reform. The prison reform side of the bill basically included this. They wanted to place people within 500 driving miles of their last known address. Those of you who know, if you are in the federal system, you could be from Connecticut and mess around and end up in California or Colorado, right? Because the feds bounce you all the way around. Well, which we know that, number one, it places a financial hardship on families. And number two, it does not make for a smoother post-conviction or post-release transition back into communities. If you have accessibility to your community, so on and so forth, it's going to reduce the likelihood of institutional infractions, keep you engaged in the community, etc. So place people within 500 driving miles of their last known address. It prohibited the shackling of pregnant women who are incarcerated. It provided free feminine hygiene products to women who are incarcerated. There's our dignity director, Topeka K. Sams, she tells a very riveting story about how when she was incarcerated, she had to quantify her cycle. And you know, me and my male ignorance, I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
She says that because she had an excessive flow, she would have to take her pads, her spent pads, bring them to an officer. He or she would count them before they gave her more pads or tampons or whatever it is that it was, right? So we wanted to increase dignity, you know, and decency for women, right? And give them access to feminine hygiene products. So free access. So the bill did that. The bill also provided identification cards to people who were going to be released from incarceration. Do you know what it does for your dignity to be able to have an identification card from the state of Connecticut, and I don't have to walk around with a federal inmate card to say, like, you know, 139599014. It just does something to you. It gives you it gives you a sense of somebodyness.
Yeah, it does.
Right? Yeah. So the bill provided that on the prison reform side. Additionally, it unlocked education access to approximately 16,000 people who are currently waitlisted for basic education. So we're not talking about post-secondary education like you know that I had the great fortune of being subsidized with. We're talking about access to GED, right? Like, you know, vocational training, so on and so forth.
Basic.
This is basic stuff that people should have in order to be able to attempt to make a meaningful contribution back into their communities. Yeah. So that was on the prison reform side. And then we heard from the dissenters, who said that the bill didn't quote unquote go far enough, right? And in any movement, you need creative tension. You need people who are going to stand out and speak loud about this doesn't go far enough. So when it got to the Senate side, it passed the House and now it has to pass the Senate. So when it got to the Senate side, we said that we have to do sentencing reform. What does sentencing reform look like? Well, you probably heard something about the crack cocaine disparity, right? So prior to 2010, if you got busted with 1 gram of crack cocaine, it was the equivalent of getting busted with 100 grams of cocaine. Now, the only difference is that the white boys in the yacht clubs, they snort cocaine, and the people, you know, in the hood, we do crack. So there's going to be that disparity there. And I said that in the inverse. Being busted with 1 gram of cocaine is the equivalent of being busted with 100 grams of crack cocaine. So we had to fix that. And back in 2010, when under the Obama administration, when they reduced that disparity from 100 to 1 down to 18 to 1, it wasn't retroactive. Which means that the people who were on the inside did not benefit from it. So we had the opportunity to come back and make that retroactive, which was going to impact approximately 3,000 people. I was remiss not to say this as well. In the Federal Bureau of Prisons, you were supposed to be entitled to 54 days a year earn good time credit. So for every year that you do, you get 54 days off your sentence. As the current practice was prior to the First Step Act, it was only 47 days. So we increased that to 54 days in the First Step Act, which is going to retroactively impact approximately 4,000 people. So before the close of 2019, we have 7,000 people who are going to be released from custody back into our communities.
Wow.
That would not have existed prior to the First Step Act being passed.
And on top of that, they get their ID.
They get their IDs. They get the access to education, so on and so forth. A longer length of time in a halfway house, etc.
And these are all non-violent offenses.
That's kind of nuanced. The people who are going to benefit from the crack cocaine retroactivity, there may be some form of violence in their case. That's on a case by case basis, but 100% of the federal prison population will receive that increase in good time.
Wow.
Okay, so also on the sentencing reform side, there's called 924C stacking that no longer exists. So what that means is this: when the police comes in your house, Jay, they heaven forbid, they happen to execute a warrant on you. And if you get busted with some marijuana and you happen to but you happen to have an inoperable firearm, say for instance, if it was your grandfather's World War II relic, because you got busted with a gun while you were in possession of drugs, they can sentence you consecutively. So now you get 5 years for the marijuana, but you also get another 10 years consecutive to that 5 years of marijuana.
Level.
This is on a federal level.
So on a state level, once the federal level once that's accomplished, then the state will have.
That's a great question, because states usually follow federal precedents.
Right.
So now, immediately after we pass the First Step Act, what we end up that's a great question, because states usually follow federal precedents.
Right.
So now, immediately after we passed the First Step Act, what we end up having was we got calls from states who saying that they're going to introduce a version of their own First Step Act into their states. This gave people the political cover, right, to say, okay, you know what, we can do something and it's good with my base. We can do something, and I'm not getting calls from my constituents saying, "Why did you do this?" so on and so forth. In fact, it was the opposite. We, our elected officials, we through our empathy network, we mobilized, we galvanized, we had people reach out to their elected officials saying, "Listen, I'm impacted by this indirectly. I have a cousin, I have a brother, I have a sister, I have an aunt, I have an uncle who is missing from the Thanksgiving table, and I want these people home." So there are two other provisions, which is called 841 and 851, and essentially what that means is that reduced the mandatory life sentences in the federal in the feds down to 25 years. Now you say 25 years is still a significant time, but it gives people hope, right? It's not an indefinite sentence. And we also have compassionate release as well. So if you serve either 2/3 of your sentence and or you happen to be over the age of 65, now you are going to be considered for release. So all of those things are inclusive in the First Step Act.
Nice. That's a lot.
Yes.
That's a lot. That's a lot of change.
It's a lot in the first step.
Right. In the first step. Right.
Yeah, imagine what we can do, by the time we get to the fifth step.
Right.
So, but this did begin. The work began with Obama, correct? And then it kind of like.
The work began with Obama, without question.
Okay.
I think that.
I want to make that clear for everybody who's like, Trump did it.
Yeah. Well, I always say, man, I got 99 problems with Trump, but this ain't one.
Okay.
You follow what I'm saying? My grandmother used to say, when you find it an issue, and you are vehement against it, you have the obligation and the responsibility to stand out and speak loud against it. However, when you find something that you can align with, even if you disagree with people 99% of the time, on that 1% of the time, you have the responsibility and the obligation to stand with that person. Yeah. And on this issue, this is where we found alignment. I mean, it's not often that you're going to get Reverend Al Sharpton, Dr. Jamal Bryant, to stand on the same side of an issue as Lindsey Graham and Donald Trump. It just doesn't happen.
I still, it was the conspiracy in me, and the rebellious part of me is like, man, this is a conspiracy.
It gotta be something.
There's gotta be something, but this is a real thing.
This is a real thing, and this bill was led. This bill was led by people such as myself, people such as Topeka K. Sam, people such as Sarita Martin, people such as my mentor Glenn E. Martin, people who have been who had to stand up for account, people who have 9-digit federal registration numbers and state identification numbers. Right. Yeah. This work was led by people who have been impacted by the system. Notice that I didn't say felons. Notice that I didn't say ex-cons. I said people. because we are people before we are anything else, right? You know, and I often tell people when they use that term, well, what do you think about inmates and what do you think about? I say I don't know any inmates. I know fathers who are incarcerated. I know mothers who are incarcerated.
I'll bring back some humanity.
Exactly, and this is what we were talking about before we went on the air. You know, we need to increase our empathy IQ, and we need to inject a spirit of love into our conversations when we're talking about people. Because you know, even in my practice, I would never say, as I'm charting a note, this crack addict came into my office to seek help, right? You always put the person before the issue. Absolutely. And I think that the criminal justice space is the only space where there seems to be this spirit of insensitivity when it comes to identifying people. We've moved into such a space where we would not dare call somebody a faggot. Or call somebody, you know, a queer or something to that degree, right? Because we know that community would stand out and you would either be off the air or probably, you know, disappeared somewhere. Right. So why is it that when it comes to, you know, a system that disproportionately affects black, brown, and poor whites, that we use these pejoratives, you know, of the sort? So that's my little tangent on that.
So what is now the work that you're doing with Van Jones, Jay Z, this reform, right? I know it's out there, definitely in the hip hop culture, which I love, is the fact that we're able to, you know, hip hop is able to do what hip hop has always done, be a reflection of what's going on in society. Correct. Right? So now we see reform happening. What happens in reform? I know you said that $50 million was put into this. Yeah. What exactly is happening with that, and does that come into Connecticut, or is that certain parts of the country?
Yeah, so Van has, I don't know if you guys have been monitoring Twitter, Instagram, and or it's popped up in your local news feed, but if you are still on MySpace, I would urge you to... There's a MySpace? Yeah. I would urge you to get current. Basically, what's happening is that it was announced this Wednesday that Van has been named a CEO. He's still chair of Cut 50, but he's been named CEO of Reform. And Reform is a initiative, and it's an alliance that is specifically going to be focusing on probation and parole reform. We talk about the 2.2 million people who are in our nation's prisons, but we don't talk about the 6.2 million people who are currently on probation and or parole. One of which I happen to be one of those people as a result, as a consequential result of what I talked about earlier, where having been rearrested, I had to pay excessive fines and restitution in excess of $15,000. So, and I'm. Thank God I'm clear.
Oh, that's gone.
Yeah.
That's gone.
Yeah. But you know something, people either pay for their freedom or they pay for their health.
Yes, sir.
Right? You know,
yes,
so
sir.
like, you know, to me that wasn't about nothing so long as I'm still able to do the work, still able to get up at, 6 o'clock in the morning to travel here. Yeah. So it's all good. But they're focused on probation and parole. And right now the targeted states are going to be Pennsylvania and it's going to be New York. There's $50 million that has been committed, via Robert Kraft, Jay Z, Meek Mill. Robert Kraft is the owner of the New England Patriots, and also the
he was like,
and also heir to the Kraft cheese brand. And Mike Rubin, who is a billionaire who owns Philadelphia 76ers, and we have a few other investors as well.
And how did those states get chosen, and are you going to expand at some point to other states?
I think that there is, obviously you have to focus on what your primary focus is, right? And those, I think that those states got chosen, considering the complexities of probation and parole in those states, the legislative landscape, and where the need is, right, where the greater need is. So you always focus on the greater need, and then you expand. I think that Pennsylvania is near and dear to Meek. Meek is a resident of the state of Pennsylvania. It's the system that incarcerated him. He's been on parole. He's been on probation since he was 18 years old, and now he's 30, and he doesn't get off until 2023. And he hasn't, when he hit all of his rearrests has been due to technical violations. These aren't like new criminal cases. These are just due to, the rearrests have been to technical violation, popping willies and breaking up a fight, so on and so forth. So this issue is obviously near and dear to him, and Mike Rubin is, resident of Pennsylvania as well. So I think that their focus is going to be on those two states, and obviously to be able to expand, because in criminal justice, you want to be able to expand the work. You want to be able to have a systemic impact nationally.
Yeah. So there's, when I look at activism, right, and one of the areas that I never got into, and I think a lot of the people I work with don't get into it because we don't trust government, we don't trust policy, we don't trust any of it, so we don't touch legislation.
Correct, and that's where the major power is. And I'm glad that you brought that up, and I don't mean to cut you off,
please,
but that just tickled my fancy this morning.
Right. It's like in case you didn't see it.
Yeah, it's just doing something in my life. So. Yes, and I've worked in a plurality of different roles in criminal justice reform, right? Doing direct service stuff to advisory role and consulting on behind the scenes on political campaigns of an unnamed governor, etc. So I have a familiarity, right? And my range is kind of, my bandwidth on it is kind of broad. The power is in policy. Oh, sorry. The power is in policy. You see how excited I got banging on the table. The power is in policy. Yeah. Language influences perception. Perception influences policy. Let me say that again, in the event if your viewers are sleepy and they didn't hear it. Language influences perception. Perception influences policy. Policy holds power over people. The deeper dive is in policy. When you change policy, literally you are impacting systems. It's good, people need to have services when they are released from prison, and they need to be able to, go into these programs, so on and so forth. But we need to keep people from going into prison. In the first place, right? That's back. The latter is the back end reform. We need to change laws that if people find themselves in a system, then they aren't going to be excessively prosecuted and disproportionately sentenced.
Proactive as opposed to reactive.
Correct. It's almost like the notion that an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure, right? So this is the policy portion of it is the ounce of prevention, and it's not sexy. Right, it doesn't have the splash as and it doesn't really get a lot of media attention unless you have a Van Jones, unless you have a Kim Kardashian, unless you have kind of those influencers who are bringing attention to it. It's the stuff that don't necessarily show up in stat sheets, right? Media would much rather be deployed to people who are to a program, who are being the recipients of a grant or of an award, so on and so forth. But I'm of the notion as to where we need to keep these people from even going into the system in the first place, right? So, and that's where the real power is. It's in policy.
So as he was speaking of activism, let me ask you, because I believe in the thought, right? As we say, to whom much is given, much is required. You know what I mean? And I've always been critical of people in entertainment, people that have these platforms where they could speak to a whole group of our people, especially the kids. And I always said, well, Jay Z, somebody that's very well known, very respected. With the critical situation that our people are in, mentally, physically, why don't he just take a team of whoever he know he could get, go into the hood and literally, whatever hood, different hoods, and literally tell our people, yo, it's time to put down the guns. It's time for us to stop killing each other. It's time, we're not each other's enemies. So why do it seem like the people that are at those certain levels don't bring it to that level?
Let me. I can't speak for Jay, but let me speak to the notion and the concept of that.
Yes, sir.
If this is Psych 101, if you take something from someone, you have to replace it with equal to or greater, or with something equal to or of greater value. If I come into your space, again, going back to when I was 5 years old, seeing my parents carted away in federal prison, so on and so forth. If I go into your space and I tell you, don't do this, okay? Hey, you need to put down the gun, so on and so forth. Okay, but this is what I know. This is how I've been conditioned. This is the pathology. My mama has did this. My cousins did this. My daddies did it. All of my homies is doing it, right? So what you're saying is foreign to me. So unless you are providing me access to something that's different outside of this paradigm, I'm going to continue to do
It's
it.
like you're talking like Charlie Brown.
Right.
Wah, 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 wah.
Yeah.
So yes, I might listen to you, right, for the moment, but how is this going to produce a movement? You and so my thing is that, okay, rather than going into a space and telling people to put the guns down, so on and so forth, what can I do alternatively, right, that's going to raise people's attention? What can I do with my power? What can I do with my privilege? What can I do with my celebrity? What can I do with my voice? What can I do with my dollars that's going to be able to impact this issue?
Right.
I'm going to put my dollars, I'm going to make an investment in a space where I know that I'm going to get systemic, where I'm going to be able to create systemic change. So the notion that going into a place, speaking to people and saying, hey, stop doing this, I know how I was when I was busting my gun. Man, you going back to Beverly Hills. You follow what I'm saying? Like, you rap about BK and you rap about Bridgeport, but you don't know what it's hitting on. I'm thinking about the times when I was in a pissy hallway in Father Panic Village. You know what I'm saying? You know, pumping my packages. If somebody would have walked in there talking about, yo, Canali, man, you need to stop doing what you're doing, I'm gonna be like, man, you better get up out of here before I go ahead on and pop you.
What are you actually showing me?
Correct. What alternative are you showing me? Right? And there's a wealth of genius in our community. There's a wealth of genius that stands on those corners, right? It takes a lot of ingenuity in order to criminal enterprise, right? You got to learn how to like duck the law. You got to learn how to like be evasive. You got to learn how to juggle like
all kinds of skills, hard skills.
Yeah, like 5 and 6 different women. Like it's a lot of it's a lot of juggling. You got to keep a lot of balls in the air, man. So you know, if we create opportunity for people, right? And if we create space, a safe space for them to say, hey, you know something? That same level of ingenuity that you have in order to be able to do this, you can do this. Right. And this is the opportunity that I'm going to create for you to do this with stipulations. I'm not going to hold you accountable, but I'm going to definitely hold you responsible. Right. You're going to be responsible to yourself, right? You're going to be responsible to your community, so on and so forth. If I create space for you, then what will happen is that you'll see a shift in thinking.
So real quick, just to give me maybe an example of what that will look like, because what I'm speaking to is just the changing the mindset of us being able to love each other, us being able to look at each other differently.
But I don't think that should be the responsibility of a celebrity.
Well,
I think that should be the responsibility of the parent and the community.
No, absolutely, right?
Go ahead, please.
No, absolutely. So, but we also understand that a lot of the children look up to these celebrities. Why? Because a lot of the parents are absent. Right. A lot of the parents are incarcerated. A lot of the parents are on drugs and all these different things. So they look up to these celebrities. They look up to these different people that have these platforms of influence. So coming from them, coming from them, it would make a high impact, and also the number that they would be able to impact with something like that. You know what I mean? So I'm just saying, like, how would that look as an example to start changing that, as we as you spoke of before, the perpetualness and the Willie Lynch and the mindset of why we hate each other, hate ourselves so much.
Yeah, I think that people have to do. First of all, you got to stay in your lane. You have to stay in your lane, right? Like, I'm not a subject matter expert on women's related issues. Actually, I became more aware of my male privilege as a result of being involved in this work, right? Like I realized, like, I'm as a woman, and the sister, she can attest to this. Like, when you get up in the morning, you probably think about like how these jeans are going to fit on you, who's going to be looking. No, seriously, right? Like, who's going to be looking at you? You follow what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, guys don't do that. Right, we don't walk in a room like, I'm wondering if they looking like how my traps are. Like, it just don't work like that. So I think that you have to stay in your lane first and foremost. The second thing is that you have to be able to use what it is that you have in order to be able to create space for other people. With privilege comes responsibility. With privilege comes responsibility, and I think people like Jay should not be the exception. I think that everybody who has a platform, whether that's on TV, whether that's selling units, whether that's moving units, etc., I think that we all have a responsibility to that.
Can you? I'm like watching the time. I didn't even realize we were there at that point. Can you let the people know where to find you, and we're going to exit right out?
Absolutely. So I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. You can find me at Louis L. Reed, Louis, the letter L, REED. Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, and or what else? Instagram. Lewis L. Reed.
Lewis, thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate you, man.
All right, thank you everybody for tuning in. Make sure you